The House will come to order. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 218. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 218, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to transportation, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Senate File 218 deals with ditch mowing and the rules that the Department of Transportation moved forward at the end, or just at the beginning of this year. The amendment that I have, which is the DE2 amendment, I ask for your support on, will essentially is that, and the amendment to the amendment, which we hopefully will get support on as well, will ultimately be focusing on putting a one-year moratorium on that rulemaking, so that rural groups and other organizations can be better vetted and better vet the potential for what will be moving forward as a potential permanent rule in this area.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swedzinski moves to amend Senate File number 218. The first engrossment as follows, and the amendment is coded DE2.
Recognize the member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski, to introduce your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment reflects a vast majority of the work that we've been doing. We do have an amendment to the amendment that is really the Peace in the Valley amendment that gets the department on board with this moving forward, and ultimately for governor's consent for signature. And I would make a motion to suspend the rules to accept that amendment to the amendment.
The clerk will report the motion.
Swedzinski moves that Rule 3.33, relating to amendments must be pre-filed, be suspended for the purpose of offering the Swedzinski amendment to the Swedzinski amendment to Senate File number 218.
Discussion to the motion to suspend. The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I appreciate the opportunity to have your support on this suspension of the rules. Because of some glitz, some late conversations with the department, and just dealing with awful busy staff, and then ultimately dealing with folks outside of the room, stakeholders in the process, the amendment to the amendment just missed by a couple of moments the deadline. We've spoken. I believe Representative Hortman will speak on behalf. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman, to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Swedzinski. We're happy to support your motion to suspend the rules. Thank you for working with MnDOT. Thank you for keeping the minority informed of the progress of those discussions. And members, please vote aye.
Any further discussion on the Swedzinski motion to suspend the rules? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swedzinski is moving to amend his amendment to Senate File number 218, the first engrossment, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A4.
Recognize the member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski, to speak to the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, yeah, this amendment just reflects the conversations we've had with the department and also stakeholders. Farm Union, Farm Bureau, and other groups are comfortable with this. This simply adds to the DE2 amendment kind of an end date to the moratorium. I had an open-ended moratorium, but the governor's office felt that they didn't appreciate that. So that's going in, and then it changes a little bit some of the general language when it comes to right-of-way and trunk of right-of-way, and then when it comes to, as the next process is going to be developed, it includes agricultural groups and environmental groups. I'd appreciate your support.
Discussion on the A4 amendment to the DE2 amendment. The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Swedzinski yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Swedzinski, my question comes on the A4 amendment on the lines 1.17, 1.18, and 1.19. I noticed in the underlying amendment that you had said that the recommendations would be developed in coordination with the Commissioners of Agriculture and Natural Resources, along with the chairs and ranking members of the legislative committees. And that's replaced with input from agricultural and environmental groups. So it appears that that the public, the people's representatives, either in the executive branch or in the legislative branch, are not included in the development. It's just the lobbying groups. Is that correct?
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
No, Mr. Chair. Those lobby groups actually represent people as well. The ultimate portion of this, which we could not get Governor Dayton's approval on, would be to keep the date. And if we were able to keep the date for the moratorium and put a permanent one, then we would be able to have ultimate legislative authority upon that. And that is the responsibility. These rules have been developed by the department. And in order to actually move anything forward at all, to find some peace in the valley, that's what we've decided they needed to have. So,
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Swedzinski. I understand about the desire to get peace in the valley, and often our desire to get peace in the valley is to work something out with the stakeholders. And my concern is, where are the people in the process? I understand that groups want to be involved. That's their job, to represent their members. But I'm concerned that these recommendations for the future are going to be developed in the back rooms at some office where the lobbyists for the groups come in, and none of our constituents they're not going to be aware of it. I'd be more comfortable if there were public meetings or some actual opportunity for the public to be involved. But we do this too often here. It's not just your amendment here, and it's not just this bill. It's often we write in the stakeholders to develop the recommendations rather than the public. And I think that's a mistake. I applaud you for trying to find peace in the valley. I just can't, at some point, can't support these constant changes where we write in the stakeholders versus the public. So I'm voting no on the amendment.
Further discussion on the A4 amendment? Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion on the A4 amendment to the DE2 amendment, all those in favor of adoption of the A4 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. Members, we're now back on the DE2 amendment as amended. Discussion to the DE2 amendment as amended. The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wondering if Representative Swedzinski would yield.
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Swedzinski, as I'm trying to make my way through the amendment as amended, it appears that we are only placing the moratorium on a trunk highway that is not under the jurisdiction of the state or a political subdivision, is how I read it. So does that mean that the moratorium only applies along a trunk highway for private land? Is that how I understand it? And if so, please explain why we are limiting it to that.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Drazkowski. So what the amendment's going to do is ultimately, so there is a permitting process that's been in process for the past 30 years within the department. The issue is it's been simply not used. Of the 4,000 permits that the department collects on a yearly basis, about 32 of them or 34 of them have been related to ditch mowing and haying. And of those, most of those have been on where the adjoining landowner is public land. And so that there are a lot of as you can imagine, there has to be some sort of a process to develop that where the adjoining landowner is the state of Minnesota or a political subdivision of that, so that that could potentially move forward. I know we've heard from certain representatives here in the room that have folks in their districts that are currently working within that process where the adjoining land is publicly owned. There wouldn't be that natural progression of, where Farmer Johnson owns 160 acres along one of the state highways. It's been the natural fallback that person would have the right to do that, and that's what we hopefully currently will have, and hopefully will currently move forward. But the areas where the state actually owns that, that is a gray area, and so that would continue to go, so it would not be affected on the moratorium.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Swedzinski. Well, Representative Swedzinski, I'm going to support the bill today. I also have to just kind of weigh in my disappointment. I was hoping with this issue we would come forward with actually some changes to an area of statute that is overly broad in its control of the ability for local people to do the right thing. And the right thing is what, as you mentioned, they've been doing all along. Members, we have farmers out there throughout Minnesota and other landowners and other people who are basically doing the responsibility of state and local government, and that is to control the weeds, the noxious weeds along our roadways, which many of them aren't controlled. Anybody ever seen wild parsnip growing along a road? Well, members, part of the reason we have that is because of the limits we have placed in statute over time on the ability for farmers to do the right thing. And I would really like to see us move faster than this, Representative Swedzinski, but certainly what you have is maybe a good start, but I certainly hope next session we can come with something that will aggressively move and do the right thing and protect motorists from wildlife because of the really the cover that's created there because of the nonsensical rules that we have that prohibit farmers from doing what they do, which is the right thing along these roadways. But we'll have that debate when we come next year and look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion on the DE2 amendment as amended? The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Swedzinski yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Swedzinski, with the moratorium in place, does existing law still apply, the August 1st? So the prohibition on mowing before, the moratorium is on the permitting, correct, and having the permit, but it is not changing any current law on prohibiting mowing before August 1st. Is that correct?
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe that would be correct.
Any further discussion on the DE2 amendment as amended? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the DE2 amendment as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 218, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion on Senate File 218 as amended. The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, Representative Swedzinski, I think you've done a good effort here on trying to find peace in the valley. I know this is a controversial issue, but I think often during this discussion, we don't discuss that we're talking about public property being used for private purposes. That the road ditches, and I heard Representative Drazkowski, now I know that with some counties and with some townships, the easement and the ownership changes, but with the state trunk highways, that's pretty clear. They're owned by all the people. And so that gets to why I had the question of why are the people not included in the recommendations, because that ownership is there, and that ownership of providing habitat for the bees, the butterflies, the birds, and the diversity of vegetation is a public purpose. So I know the desire here is often to find a compromise that everybody can live with. and the current issue you found a compromise. But the issue won't go away, and we're not dealing with always the same memory of how things are done. I remember mowing road ditches. I grew up on a farm. I remember mowing them with a lawnmower. My dad did that too, right next to our fields. But I also remember seeing large bales rolled up with for sale signs on them in public road ditches. And I don't think we want that. So I hope that discussion will continue in this process during the year, and I think it's important, again, that the current law still stands.
Further discussion on Senate File 218 as amended. The member from Pope, Representative Anderson P.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Yeah, this has been a rather contentious issue when it arose around the first of the year. And I think we got, at least those of us in farm country, got more emails on this than just about anything else. And so I think that speaks to the passion that this evoked from farmers who have done this, who've mowed road ditches for the last 20, 30, or 40 years and done a good job at doing it. And we've heard the number passed around that this involves about 200,000 acres of state ditch easements in the state. And I just took a number of $10 an acre for a custom rate of cutting grass or cutting hay. So on those 200,000 acres, that's amounted to a savings of the state, you could say, of a couple $1 million a year that farmers have done that in saving the state having to go out there and cut those ditches on their own. So the farmers do a valuable service here. They can pick up some feedstock, some hay. And the cutting date, I think, is a little bit still in question. If you wait till late in the summer, there's not a lot of feed value left in the grass that's in the ditch. And by the way, a lot of that road ditch grass is just that. It's smooth brome grass, which isn't a real good habitat for pollinators. Unless those are reseeded with some other kind of flowers, it's mainly a grass out in these road ditches. But I too want to thank the representative for working hard in what seemed to be what could have been, should have been an easier solution, but there's a lot of issues to settle here. He's done a good job of trying to bring folks together and to come up with a compromise, and let's hope we can do that. And I would agree with Representative Drazkowski coming up with some stronger language as we look to this down the road to next year. So thanks, Representative Swedzinski, and I support your bill.
The member from Roseau, Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members, Representative Swedzinski, thank you for championing this issue. I know there's a lot of people in the legislature that have worked hard on this, and I appreciate the effort. For those of you that don't know, in rural Minnesota, this is a very, very large issue. It parallels the buffer issue in my district. I do want to echo what Representative Anderson said about rural landowners providing an extremely valuable service to the state of Minnesota by mowing ditches. They save, as Representative Anderson said, save the state an immense amount of money by them doing the ditch mowing rather than having to have the DOT do it. For us up there, a lot of this has to do with public safety of keeping our ditches mowed. If you have motorcycles and so forth, we've got a lot of deer up there. Thankfully, they're coming back a little bit. And if the grass is tall on the shoulder of the road, it can pose a very, very significant public safety issue. And a couple other things real quickly. For the life of me, members, I mean, this is serious. I do not understand why we would want to attract wildlife, whether it's deer or raccoons or butterflies or bees or whatever, closer to the highway. I have never seen a butterfly or a bee survive the impact with the windshield of a car or a semi-truck when it's going 40, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. It defies logic. What we should be doing is enhancing the back slopes of the ditches and the land across there and not attracting pheasant broods closer to the highway. It makes no sense whatsoever to me. So I hope that we can keep that in mind as we move the issue forward next year. And Representative Swedzinski, as with regards to the public being involved in this, I certainly hope that you don't have any meetings in the dark of the night. Thank you.
Any further discussion? For the Representative Swedzinski, would you like the last word? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 106 ayes and 23 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 837. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 837, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to transportation, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Brown, Representative Torkelson, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. House File 837 deals with Federal FAST Act funding for the Department of Transportation and its authorization. There is an amendment.
There is an amendment to the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moves to amend House File number 837, the first engrossment, and the amendment is coded A2.
Recognize the member from Brown, Representative Torkelson, to introduce the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I think before we vote on the amendment, I maybe should explain the need for removing this language from the bill. And there's a little history lesson involved here, if you'll indulge me, Mr. Speaker. These federal funds were first made available to the state of Minnesota back in September of last year, and there was a request by the governor that these funds be authorized by the LAC. Past chair of the Transportation Committee, former Representative Kelly, sent a letter to the governor informing him that this was not the normal procedure, that these funds are normally authorized by the legislature. At that point, after some bickering through the media, the governor did back down and decided no longer to pursue this authorization through the LAC. After that exchange of debate through the media and in other ways, former Chair Sanders made a data request to the Department of Transportation for the data surrounding that time period when that conversation was going on. That data request was made on October 31st of last year, and nothing, absolutely nothing was received from the Department of Transportation in regard to that request. I don't know if they thought that we would just forget about it or if they hoped there'd be a change in majority. I don't know, Mr. Speaker and members, but they did not respond. So come January of this year, when I was named chair of the Transportation Committee, I realized that this issue had been unresolved, and I sent a letter to the Department of Transportation renewing Representative Sanders' request for this information. And this is an example of the sort of information we received in return, Mr. Speaker, heavily redacted emails with nothing legible for the most part. We didn't feel this was satisfactory. We felt that the way that the department was excusing their behavior and the way that they were claiming that it was proper to redact this information was not authorized in statute. We pointed that out and continued to try and get this information from the Department of Transportation. And that's why the language that we're removing from the bill was added to this bill in Ways and Means. The language that we're removing actually says, well, as soon as the information that's been requested is received from the department, then we will authorize that these funds be utilized by the Department of Transportation. the discussions went on, and I'm happy to report that the governor instructed the department to deliver the information to us. We have received it as of last Friday, and the governor, I thank the governor for instructing his department to get this information to us. We are very happy to have it and very happy to preserve the authority of this body in being able to request data from our commissions. If we had allowed them to continue to refuse to come forth with this properly requested data, it would have set a precedent that would have gone forward in time, one that would have lessened our power and our authority to investigate what our various commissions are up to. So with that, Mr. Speaker and members, I would ask for a green vote on the amendment to remove the language.
Discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciated your speech, Representative Torkelson. And I sent you a letter a couple days ago asking for you to disclose the preparation of your budget materials to us. And in the spirit of Governor Dayton, I'd ask that you do that.
Further discussion on the A2 amendment. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the A2 amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 837, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion on House File 837 as amended. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'd urge a yes vote. In addition to what Representative Torkelson, Chair Torkelson said, it's very important and urgent that we get this money out the door as soon as possible so that the projects, some over 20 projects around the state, can get started this summer in this construction season. So that's why this bill is before us today, and it's very urgent that we vote yes.
Any further discussion on House File 837 as amended? Representative Torkelson for the final word.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hornstein. Yes, this $105 million will get a few projects rolling, and as soon as possible. We want our contractors out there working. It looks like it's going to be an early spring, and the sooner this money is available, the sooner they can get to work. I urge a green vote on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 662. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File Number 662, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health.
Recognize the member from Scott, Representative Loonan, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Senate File 662 is a solution designed to address the problem with dental resources or dental services to low-income situations. Currently, we've got over 600 people waiting for dental service, and part of the problem is the fact that our reimbursement rates are inadequate, and we have a hard time getting dentists to step in and take these. What my bill does is it broadens who is allowed to legally perform dentistry in Minnesota to not only licensed dental professionals and not only students at the University of Minnesota Dental School, but any accredited dental school in Minnesota, so that resource is available. I realize this is a small bill, but there is an urgency here because as soon as we get into April, all of these dental schools will start assigning their practicums to their students, and we want to make sure that our nonprofits have access to that resource. It's a win-win situation. They get the experience they need, and the people that need the dental care now have access to it. So I please urge you to vote green.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 662.
Third reading. Discussion on Senate File 662. Seeing no discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Pepin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Thursday, March 30th, 2017, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File Numbers 4 and 888.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. There is a motion at the desk. The clerk will report the motion.
Hoppe moves that House File Number 1249 be recalled from the Committee on Taxes and be re-referred to the Committee on Civil, Law, and Data Practices Policy.
Recognize the member from Carver, Representative Hoppe, to introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion, and this is a provision for housing finance credits. And we didn't know until yesterday or the day before that it had some data privacy issues. So we're going to have the bill sent to the Committee on Civil Law. I've spoken to Representative Lesch, and I've looked for the chair a couple of times, and I keep missing her. But we'd like to have the bill go there and make sure everything's taken care of.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Announcements. The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the legislative auditor opinion surveys are due on Friday. I have some extra surveys here if you haven't completed yours. So they are due on Friday, and I'd encourage you to stop by and pick one of these up. Thank you.
Announcements. The member from Sherburne, Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, members, the Ways and Means Committee will meet at 7 o'clock. Ways and Means at 7 o'clock in room 5, to take up the transportation and education bills. Education first. And House Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee will meet at 6 o'clock in room 454.
Any further announcements? The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m., Wednesday, March 29th, 2017.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 o'clock a.m., Wednesday, March 29th, 2017. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Pepin, I just wanted to clarify the schedule for tomorrow. You anticipate that we'll be coming in at 10 and then recessing to caucus and then coming back to the floor at approximately what time?
She will yield. The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hortman, approximately 11.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Pepin, then do you anticipate doing the bills at that time? Until we're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Representative Hortman, yes.
Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 10 o'clock a.m. Wednesday, March 29th, 2017.